Alright, good evening everybody. How are you all doing? You can probably hear the birds around me. It's so beautiful where I'm at in my place in Mexico, in Guadalajara. So today I'm going to actually talk to you about something really awesome. I had this revelation when I was doing my meditation this morning about how the masculine and masculine energy can truly protect and support the feminine energy. And I'm talking about energy within ourselves. So if you're someone who wants to really grow your feminine energy, if you're someone who wants to be able to find rest and be productive, if you're someone who even wants to grow your masculine energy, this conversation is going to be really helpful for you. So the theme of this month's, I have a membership called the Emotional Freedom Collective, and the theme of this month was all about the masculine and the feminine. And so, I've done a whole series of calls. So I did a call earlier this week. Actually, it was on Tuesday, which was about the masculine and the feminine. And that got me to really think, with a lot of questions of how can we grow our feminine energy? How can we grow our masculine energy? It got me to think. And this morning I realized that as I was telling them, the feminine energy is like a rose, right? So think about a rose and a beautiful, beautiful flower, right? One of the most gorgeous flowers in the whole, biological kingdom. Now, the rose is actually protected so strongly by a thorn. And when we look at the thorn, we think, oh my God, this is disgusting. A thorn, it's going to hurt me. But the thorn and the rose serve such a beautiful synchronicity together, where the flower, which is the feminine aspect, is allowed to be displayed, allowed to look so beautiful. But the thorn, even though it knows that it's not very good looking, that it possibly causes harm to people, that it's not very appreciated, it provides protection. It allows the rose to bloom because the thorn exists. To us human beings who don't necessarily understand it, we're like, oh my God, it's so annoying, this fucking thorn. But the two of them actually are what makes the rose so beautiful, because otherwise anybody who goes by, any animal that brushes by will destroy that beautiful flower. So now if you have to think of your own life, if you have to think of your own self and say, how can I allow my rose to flourish? How can I, as the feminine, allow my rose to flourish? Now, a lot of you women, for example, may be single. And so you may think to yourself, and you may be wondering, okay, Yats, I don't have a man yet in my life to provide that masculine energy where then I can complement it with my feminine energy. So how can I do that just on my own? And I came across, in my meditation today, I was thinking to myself, and the left side of my body more recently has gone through a lot of beating, a lot of trauma, and the left side is the feminine side of the body. And I'm realizing that it's been worn out. And the right side of my body, which represents the masculine, has been completely fine. In fact, you won't even believe it. I have so many gray hairs on the left side of my head, and I have not a single one on the right side of my head. I have injuries on my left side of my back, on my left knee, on my ankle. Everything is so crazy on my left side. This comes to psychosomatics about the masculine and the feminine side of the body. But it made me wonder, am I not doing enough to protect my feminine energy? Now, a lot of women in North America, a lot of women in conditioning of individualistic cultures. Individualistic cultures are cultures like the ones in North America, the ones in, hey Joshua, buddy, the ones in North America, the ones maybe in Northern Europe, where the value of the individual is prided more than the value of the community. So even in these cultures, a woman is told that you are not valuable enough unless you represent enough of an economic success, professional success, unless you're paying the bills, unless you're very independent. As human beings, we're not meant to be solo. We're not supposed to exist by ourselves. I mean, that's why we're born into community. That's why we're born off another being. However, we have to be able to develop our own energy so that we're not dependent on somebody else. And so in this space, now when you're asking, a lot of people have asked me and said, hey Yats, how can I develop my masculinity or my femininity as a woman? Because unfortunately, and I've dated so many women in North America especially, I come from a very collectivist culture, but I've dated so many women in North America especially who have such strong masculine conditioning, and it's not their fault. It's because they've been raised in societies where what they're contributing is not valuable enough. It's not valid enough. So what happens is unconsciously, they start to suppress their own feminine energy. Why? Because they're so used to the whole of society doing it. And so they start to get conditioned and think for themselves that, just because I'm I'm playful and creative and flowy, those things are not valuable enough. Those things are not worth enough. I can't really become an artist. I can't really step into the spiritual space. There's no money for those kind of things. So what do I have to do? I have to step into a professional space. I have to wake up at 4 a.m. I have to push myself and be aggressive about developing this identity. I have to become tough. I have to become hyper independent. And so all of these things unconsciously suppress the feminine energy. Now, this is how beautiful God or the universe, whatever you want to call it, has created all of us, because yin can't survive without yang, and the yang can't survive without the yin. So the masculine and the feminine have to be able to complement each other to be able to survive. So in this particular space, I'm going to explain how exactly the masculine within you can actually support and elevate the feminine within you to be able to survive. Now, ancient Taoists and ancient Buddhists and, you know, people from the East who designed and studied and created like all this psychosomatic philosophy and you know, the masculine and feminine, they believe the masculine and feminine was in every single thing. And actually it is. If you look at flowers, right? Flowers have a stamen, which is actually the masculine part of it, and they have, I can't remember for the life of me what the feminine part of the flower is, which actually gets fertilized by the stamen, so I apologize. But they both exist, and they both have to serve their purpose, much like I just talked about, like the rose and the thorn. So in our bodies, in our lives, what are the things that represent the feminine? Creativity, flow, rest. This is a massive, massive, massive one, which in individualistic societies, in North American societies, we completely belittle. We don't give enough value to rest. We don't value the ability of growth that happens when we're resting. And here's how. The human body, for those of you, I actually just hit the gym and came back. And what happens is when we work out, we think we're actually building muscle, but we're not. We're actually destroying muscle fiber. So it's a catabolic process. That's actually represented by the masculine, where you go to the gym or you go exercise or you're pushing yourself. Where the muscle actually grows is when you're resting, your brain actually sends hormones, growth hormones through your body that actually repair the muscle fibers. So without rest, you cannot actually grow your muscles, which is why you have to have off days. You have to have like times when you relax. So the rest there is so important for your goal, which is what? To grow. So the combination of the masculine, which is like pushing and doing the exercise of whatever you're doing, and the feminine of resting, guilt-free, without the fucking shame of society, without the judgment of everybody around, is so important to be able to actually grow. Ancient prophets and philosophers actually believed that the universe or God or whatever spoke to them only when they were really quiet, not when they were actually going out and preaching to people. So that's why they spent so much time alone. So when we talk about meditation, that's very feminine. It's actually sitting just with yourself and your own intuition, your own voice, listening and channeling the voice of the universe and the earth to be able to listen to yourself. Hyperproductivity is the opposite. It's masculine. Now you need to be productive, but you also need to complement that with rest. You need to be able to teach like I'm doing, but I also need to be able to sit with myself in the mornings and meditate. And I have a practice of just, stretching, meditating, being with myself. Apologize for the helicopter or the plane going up and above. Think about other areas in your life. So today I was talking to my community on Facebook and I was telling them that in this revelation for myself, I actually realized I have to use my masculine to grow my feminine, because last week, for example, I was working so much to produce value for this community, for like the retreat we're doing, for the gauntlets I'm doing, for the EFC, all of those things together, that I burnt out. And my body literally forced me to take rest for 4 days. And you won't believe it, in the 5 days that I was working, I saw no success with any of the projects I was working on. And in the 4 days that I was completely at rest, everything was growing. Everything actually happened. And so if we balance it out bit by bit, if we structure rest, if you organize creative time in your life, if you organize playtime in your life, if you organize music or art, you are using the masculine, which is the structure of organization, to actually make sure you have the feminine in your life. That's actually what will give you a strong enough balance. So if you're, for example, a single woman or a single man, so many men, again, in North America, I think this conversation is applicable equally to men and women in North America, because I find that a lot of men in North America have suppressed their feminine sides because of the conditioning they've had growing up, where their parents have said, or their fathers especially, because, their fathers came from a post-war period, etc., said that, emotions should be shamed, should be judged. There's no space for emotions, like emotions are weak. And so boys who grow into men at that point now don't feel safe enough to have their emotions. They think that their feminine side is something they need to shame, to suppress, to get rid of, which is why when men like that, so here's what's important, when a wounded man, that's what we call a wounded masculine, comes across a strong feminine, he will judge it, shame it, criticize it, and suppress it. Why? Because he's not ready for it. He doesn't really know how to handle it. He doesn't really know what to do with it, which is why a lot of men, when they come across women who actually demand of them to step up, to be better, to show emotions, they get triggered and push them away. They lock themselves inside, because that's not a emotionless man. That's a wounded man, and there's a strong difference between the two of those. It's a wounded masculine that creates the lack of safety to have emotions for themselves, which unconsciously then suppresses the emotions within the woman, and the child. So coming back to like why men need this as well is because men need to value, especially in North America, things like rest, things like beauty, things like slowing down, things like play, things like creativity, things like singing, dancing, flow. You know, I mean no judgment to like any of the white or North American guys, but I have heard so much from, like, I love dancing, I come from a community of dancing, but when I go out dancing, I hear from so many people and so many women that like, oh my God, white guys can't dance for shit. Now this is stereotyped, I know, so I don't mean to judge any of you, amazingly good looking or good dancing white guys out there. But what I want to say is that's never been a part of your upbringing. Because dancing looks weak. What looks stronger? Cracking a fucking six-pack, sitting in front of the game and throwing a can of beer at your TV. That probably looks stronger than like going out and dancing with your friends. So if you start to value your own femininity, you're not going to be afraid of it. You're not going to be afraid to allow yourself to move, to dance, to just swing on trees, to play with puppies. And that's actually where your energy is flowing and growing. We don't value feminine energy enough in our world in general, and especially in the Western world, we don't. And that's why the patriarchy survived. That's why organizations are full of like hyperstructure, where you have men who, right through religious organizations, political organizations, have suppressed and shamed and judged women. Now, I'm not on a feminist rant here, because I think, feminism has gone on a radical side, where now it's gone to a side where they've started to hate men. In some ways, that's radical feminism. But I'm in the concept of the masculine and the feminine existing equally. And I think it is impossible for us as human beings to live a truly beautiful life if we don't value the other part that plays in our existence. So if you are someone who is not used to, let's say, having an emotional response or dancing or being creative or flow, you must use the masculine in terms of creating structure, in terms of discipline and commitment. So these two words, discipline and commitment, are very masculine words. If you're an artist, if you're a woman who wants to step into a place where you want to play more, be creative, you want to sing, you want to dance more, what I've had to do for myself, because I want to bring out more of my feminine energy so I can actually connect with the universe, and here's another massive tool. Abundance is heavily linked with the feminine, because opportunity is created by the masculine. Preparation is the masculine, where you're actually doing the work to say, okay, I'm preparing myself, I'm making myself ready, all of that. But receiving is all feminine. So you can work as hard as you want. This whole concept of the hard worker wins all is the biggest piece of shit I've ever heard, ever. Literally, I promise you. So you can work as hard as you want, but if your feminine energy is closed off, if your door is closed, if your hands are closed like this, you're not going to receive anything. And that's all the magic of feminine energy. So abundance, basically, the last linking point in abundance is feminine energy. Opening your hands like a lotus, being open, allowing it to come to you, trust, receiving, all of those are feminine. So if you want to make more of those happen, you want to allow yourself to have and receive more from the universe, you have to prioritize trust, you have to prioritize flow, you have to prioritize creativity, you have to prioritize dance, you have to prioritize expression, you have to prioritize connection, you have to prioritize vulnerability. Write down on a sheet of paper, this is a cool little tip for you guys. Write down on a sheet of paper all of the characteristics which you define as being feminine. If you don't know all the characteristics which are feminine enough, that's okay. Research them. There's so much shit that's available on the internet today for free. Here I am sitting and fucking rambling, and you have all this stuff available. Think of how many others are also doing the same thing. So there's so much information available, especially of the masculine and the feminine. So think of what are some of the feminine characteristics or traits that I want to embody. What are some of the feminine things I want to have in my life? Write down that list. On the next side of your list, write down, how can I step into commitment or discipline to be able to have these things? So even when you talk about flow, right? Even when I talk about flow or creativity, those things are very feminine, and you should not structure flow itself. But what you can structure, or you should not structure creativity, but what you can structure is time for creativity. For me, for example, my job has pushed me to be extremely creative. I have to come up with posts to give you guys. I have to come up with videos for you guys to see. I have to come up with topics that I can share and talk about. All of that gets me to be really creative. But I've noticed for myself that I have to actually, if I'm not creative and I don't prioritize this, things for example, the followers goes down, people don't start really connecting with the work, the algorithm fucks me over, thank you Facebook and Instagram. So I have to prioritize creativity. I have to structure creativity. So all my meetings actually start only 2 hours after I start working in the morning, because the first 2 hours when my brain is open are meant for creativity. Those are meant for when I can come up with good ideas, when I can create posts, when I can like think about videos, and of course like IG lives like this later on in the evening when like I'm done with all the structure. But you have to be able to prioritize it. I've noticed for myself that if I don't rest, the quality of my work when I'm working hard is shit. So instead what I've had to do now, believe it or not, and this is so funny, I'm in Mexico where it's so fucking hot. I've had to structure nap times in the afternoon, believe it or not, and I'm not complaining. I love to nap. I've always loved to nap in the afternoon. It's the best. You should try it. Though when I nap, simply for like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, a half an hour, 1 hour, my nervous system resets. So all the stress from the first half of the day also dissipates. And it's almost like the rest is a gift for me to be sharper for the rest of the afternoon or whatever else I have to do. So that's another way I prioritized the feminine, which is rest. Now, being another aspect of being flowy or like lighthearted and fun, for me comes through musical expression. So like the guitar, maybe like singing. I love to sing, I love to play the guitar. So I've had to prioritize it. I actually have an Excel sheet for myself where I've had to step into more masculine energy. So this is why it's good for you men, because you actually may be spending a lot of your masculine energy, men in especially North America, in places which are not validating you enough, in places which may not be relevant enough for you, in places which may not be allowing you to grow. You may be spending them in what we call toxic masculine spaces or wounded masculine spaces, right? So, you know, and I'm not saying don't watch the football games. Like, I'm an ardent like soccer football fan. I will wake up at 6 in the morning to watch my games because they're in England. But you cannot let your life be ruled by the individualistic culture that's been determined before you came in here. You have to be able to choose what's actually best for you, for your family, for people around you, for connection in relationships. Why? Because if you live, here's the truth, and I'm just going to be really honest. If you as a man, for example, live with a wounded masculine, you will inevitably attract a woman who's either very masculine because your masculine's already wounded, so you'll attract a woman who's more masculine, or you'll attract a woman who's strong and she'll just reject and shut you down, and you'll be like, okay, this relationship's not working out. But either way, it's not going to be successful enough for you. So you have to step into a healthier masculine. Use discipline and commitment, two very strong things which I think men and women can both use in various levels. Women can use it as an internal masculine energy to support themselves while they're single, to develop feminine aspects of themselves. So don't just step into, I think what happens in North America is women use discipline and commitment when it comes to paying the bills, when it comes to working, when it comes to showing up at a professional workspace. And the problem is you're using the masculine to create more masculine. You're not using the masculine to create more feminine. Imagine if you're a boss, or imagine if like Uncle Sam or the fucking government came to you and said, as a woman, said to you, listen, you know what, as a woman, as this beautiful person, if you took and if you rested more, I would forgive your bills a little more. If they actually said that to you, what would you do? You'd rest more, right? You'd sit back at home and like you'd allow yourself to be more because you're not afraid of scarcity. By the way, scarcity is very wounded energy, masculine and feminine. But because you're feeling that scarcity, you feel like you need to step into the masculine, which means I'm a single mother, so I have to work, I have to survive. You're basically now, when you say I have to's and the shoulds, you're creating more and more scarcity, and you're closing yourself off more and more from the feminine. You're closing yourself off more and more from the gifts from the universe, from abundance, from serendipity. So you can work all you want, but you will never get lucky. You will never get, you'll never be able to fully just receive and absorb because you're cutting it off on your own. You're forcing yourself, even as a woman, to step into a wounded masculine. I'm not talking about just a masculine space, like in a wounded masculine space. Because you think you have to compete with everybody else in your workplace. You think that because your conditioning has said that. Your parents have said, you'll never survive if this doesn't happen. Your parents, it's so funny, I was talking to, I have a Mexican mama here, and she's actually the owner of the house I live in, and it's so amazing. This is collectivist culture, right? Like, you just meet someone who you really connect with, and if you don't really have your family close, you suddenly become like family. And we talk about how, in individualistic cultures, it's so tough that children are basically sent out at the age of 16 to 18 when their egos still haven't fully developed, their minds haven't fully developed to have their own identity. And so they're sent out in this world where they think now that I can't rely on other individuals because I have to fend only for myself. And so just from that process, again, you step into this world where you're like, oh, my focus is just on work, work, work. Why? Because I have to pay my bills at the age of 17, at the age of 18. When I have kids, I hope I don't do the same thing. But that's really, really young. And it's really difficult because it forces you into a world where you think it's already tough before it's actually tough. I'm going to say that again. Life forces you into a world which you think it's tough before it's actually tough. So what you're starting to do now is you're only starting to manifest a tough world. You're starting to manifest scarcity. You're starting to manifest where you think you only have to survive, and you will never get to a place where you can thrive. The problem also with the educational system in the Western world is it's done the same thing. It's so expensive. I dropped out of university twice, and both times, by the way, I topped my class in every single subject. I was valedictorian one. I'm not trying to say it for any other reason, but I realized that this is such a wounded system. A system where I'm like paying so much money for a hyper-structured system that doesn't allow enough creativity, enough flow, enough validation. Like the only degrees that are really valid are like, a law degree, medicine degree, certain business degrees. What about the value of creativity in art? You go and ask all the fucking artists, right? All the famous artists in the world, how many degrees they had in art. Just ask them. I mean, none of them are alive at this point, but if you had to read through it, they didn't. Because they spent their time in faith, trusting their intuition. They spent their time in faith, believing and listening to the biggest and best teacher in the world, the universe, the earth. In the East, way out in the East, I don't want to digress on this topic, but in India, and I've been blessed to be a witness of this. You would not learn from a structured school. Like now, of course, like because of the westernized world, we had like the British colonials come in, like education is different. But deep in the East, education was about going with your guru, your guruji basically, who was the mentor, into a jungle or into a space where he would take a group of like young students into this space, and he would push them so that they learned from nature. They learned by listening to nature, listening to how their body reacted to nature, listening to how their souls would react to like challenge, difficulty, because in working with each other and working with nature, they would learn to trust. They would learn that they are not beings that can control every single thing. Control is another wounded masculine thing. And in my conversation with my membership group last Tuesday, basically every single woman, even me as a man, stepped and accepted that, yeah, we have very wounded masculine energy of control. Think about this. So if control is a wounded masculine energy, right? Why would you have control? You would have to control something if you didn't trust that it would work out, right? Think about it. You would control something if you didn't trust it would work out. Now, what is trust? Trust is a feminine energy. So just in that statement, you're basically saying that I want to hold on to something with my wounded masculine because I refuse to allow any feminine energy. So because you unconsciously, because of your conditioning, your fear-based mentality from like, again, conditioning and society, you're not allowing yourself to have feminine energy. I feel so bad and sad, really. I'm not lying. It hurts my heart that society like pushes people to say you can't have downtime, you can't relax, you can't breathe, you can't enjoy yourself. No wonder we're so unhappy with ourselves, because we don't see the truth of who we are, which is we're a fucking gift. You should have to wake up in the morning and feel so good about yourself. Not all the time, because emotions go up and down, but in general you should be able to feel so good about yourself that you're like, I am a gift, and just being is the fucking experience. Not having is not the experience. It is just being. It's just to exist. It's just to be. It's just to absorb that energy. And the problem with that is that everybody's validated us on our achievements, right from when we're kids, right? I mean, my entire principle of teaching with conditioning is all about how expectations were created when we're young. Love was only given to us when we performed. Or, signs of appreciation only existed for us when we showed up in a way that was appropriate to our parents. And so, unfortunately, what that creates for us an idea is that, like, I am only worth it when I do this. So it's already scarce. It's already telling you that just as you are, you're not valid enough. This is why reparenting is so important, folks. And reparenting is actually also about the masculine and the feminine balancing it out for you. Reparenting is about you telling yourself that, you know what, no one fucking showed up for you to show you that you are lovable just as you are. Even just when you sit, just when you read, just when you sit under a tree and watch the birds, just when you allow like the breeze to blow across your face and be like, wow, I remember how nice this feels. Just when you sit on grass, and when you sit on wet grass and it feels so cool and you can smell it, we forget all of those small things. All of those small, beautiful things create bigger and bigger, beautiful things. That is how you create serendipity and abundance. Abundance does not come to you by hammering a fucking hammer against a wall again and again and again. All that happens is that your hammer either breaks or you break your arm because you're so frustrated. Abundance comes when you sit and you relax, you do the work. So the definition of luck in itself, right, is when preparation meets chance or opportunity. So the preparation aspect is the masculine side. You are actually doing the appropriate amount of work to step into that space. But then you allow opportunity to come to you. You trust that chance will come. You don't shit on your life when it's not coming, which again leads to more scarcity. You don't push yourself harder and harder and harder and harder and harder. When I was younger, for those of you who don't know, I was a professional athlete, and I used to love watching these videos which said, wake up and push yourself hard. Like, you're gonna fucking do it. Don't make excuses. And I realized that was good on days when I needed to get my ass up. But it was bad as an overall culture because I pushed myself so much that I literally snapped my hips and I had to get surgery. And I was like, what the fuck am I doing? And it was on my right side, by the way, at that point, because I'd completely burnt out my right side. I pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed, right? And so I realized at that point, I was like, all the fucking wisdom I need is in like here. All the wisdom you need is in there. People ask me, and they say it on my call as well, they're like, Yats, how can you actually, like, say this stuff so well to people and grind people? And I said, all I am is a really good mirror. I just make sure that I'm such a clean and beautiful mirror that I can reflect back to you the beauty that already exists inside you. So, not to stray off this conversation, but coming back to the masculine and the feminine, right? You have to use both energies in your life to be able to support and thrive them. So, for example, now coming back to the concept, and I know there's a lot of, I know my demographic, and I know there's a lot of single mothers, there's a lot of, young women or, middle-aged women or any women who are looking to have partners. There's a lot of men who are trying. If you're a man and you're on this, if you're following this live, it means that you are trying to learn how to be more emotionally connected. And that itself is so fucking powerful. So all of you have similar traits. And the trait in this is, how can we build our feminine energy safely? If you don't have a partner or a space or a mentor or masculine energy in your life in terms of a good masculine role model, like a good father or something, you may have to reparent yourself by being that at the start. Now, the problem is when you do that at the start, society pushes you all the way to scarcity, thinking that this much is not enough. You have to do so much to pay your bills. And that's when we get into that wounded masculine space, right? But you have to reparent yourself by getting into that masculine just a little bit to create what I like is allowing yourself to have just two words from the masculine: commitment and discipline. Have those two words to create the feminine energy. For example, if you want to, Hector, I'll come to your question later because that's that's on the other side of this topic. But to answer this, so if you are, I'm going to have a sip here, sorry. But if you want to build that feminine energy, right, and you're not giving yourself time in your day to rest, to play, to sing, to do art, how much ever you have going on in your life, trust me, I have justified to everybody that I'm the busiest guy ever, because I have to do so much, create so much, value for people. I'm leading this community of 100 and something thousand people. And you know what? What's the shittiest part about that? It just leaves me feeling more busy and not at peace. And for what? I just feel validated being busy. It sucks. It's stupid. So instead, what I would say to you is, don't fall for that scarce mentality, that wounded masculine mentality that you have to show up for everybody and you have to be getting and paying all the bills. You have to do all that you do. You have to show up for everyone. Make time to show up for yourself. Start small, because if you start big, there's actually a Japanese art that talks about how if you start too big too soon and you don't hit the target, then you feel ashamed of it and then you just break down and don't do it ever again. That's also what procrastination is based on. So start small. Start with 5 or 10 minutes in your day. Give yourself, let's say 15 minutes after the kids go to bed, or when the kids are still at school, or a break just in the middle of work where you can just start small with simple things. Go for a walk. Go for a walk with no purpose. Paulo Coelho, who's a beautiful fucking author, I love his books no matter what. In one of his books called The Pilgrimage, he put out 11 tools that he used in his journey of life, and crazy, amazing stuff. But one of his tools was a walk, and a walk with no purpose. Go at 1/3 of the speed that you'd walk at, with no intention, no direction to go anywhere. But put 30 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever on your phone as an alarm, and all you're doing in this time is just observing. Observe the leaves move just a little bit. Observe the dust on the ground. Observe other people walking around. Listen to sounds. The purpose is getting so much into the present moment, focusing so much in just the feeling of where you are, which is the feminine, that you allow the universe to now speak to you. One of my mentors also always said, she said, if you're always looking for answers, Yats, when you're so stressed, you're never going to find them. You can ask them from me, you can ask them from anybody. You'll never get them because the answers have to come from you. But if your voice in your head is so loud with stress and movement and action and everything else, you're never going to be able to hear it. Your voice can only be heard when it's silent because it's whispering to you. And so to honor that, you have to create silence in your life. So that walk actually really helps me out. And I do that walk every night actually. After dinner, I go for a nice slow walk when it's quiet, everybody's asleep. And I've noticed it brings down my morning anxiety greatly because it's allowing my brainwaves to slow down, helps me get good REM sleep. And so when I wake up in the morning, I have a morning routine, but naturally I'm just like less anxious. I'm just in the present. I validate being in the present more. Take time. I read somewhere someone put on a comment saying, I really want to have time for myself, but I just don't have time for myself. That's why you need to step into the masculine to give that motherfucking time to yourself. That time will not just appear. And that's how you prove to your feminine that you can take care of it, by stepping into your masculine in that moment. Your feminine will not just rise. It's like, that's why good partnerships have a strong masculine which allow the feminine to really thrive, and have a strong feminine which allows the masculine to feel supported, allows the masculine to feel like it can push and can keep going on. I'm talking about partnerships of like different individuals. And so we have to mimic that partnership within us first so that we can bring that partnership from the outside. And so what you can do for example, when you're talking about that time and you don't have it, discipline yourself to say 20 minutes. I don't care where, what, when, and how. Give it a particular time in the day. Say, in this time, I am unavailable, wherever it is. Now, the more you actually focus and prioritize that, whether you have kids, whether you're a single mom, whatever you've got going on, you will actually be able to find it. Because now you're believing in the concept of your own abundance. You're saying, I will make the time and the time will come to me. You will see how it's crazy how fucking abundant the universe is. But if you believe in its abundance, it suddenly connects the dots all on its own without you fucking interfering. And it just comes to you so fucking easily. I've seen so much of it in my own life in the recent past in itself. I'll give you one really strong example of it. When the pandemic first started, or actually before that, somewhere around there, I was working, I was doing this privately and this kind of stuff privately. I had a job at a gym because I used to be a therapist, so, and I used to work with biomechanics, blah, blah, blah. Pandemic hit, obviously that shit went out the window, so I didn't have a job. And then I was living in Canada, in Toronto, and I was telling myself, I have to keep working because I need to have this money to pay my rent, to like do all my stuff. And so I lost most of that job and I was living off of welfare. I'm being completely honest here. Like the Canadians, they had a pandemic thing. And I spoke to my mentor and I said, I think, I should go to a grocery store and work there. I know it's like not something I enjoy. It's not something I would do, but I feel like I should go work in a grocery store because at least I'll make money, right? I'll be productive. And I need to. I don't like depending on like this, like the welfare system. Like that's not me. And she said some of the most beautiful things. Now she's also very Christian, and it's beautiful how she used that messaging through it. But she said there was like this passage from like the Bible. You can imagine like it's passage from any fucking like book, it doesn't really matter. But she talked about how there was some individual was supposed to receive a lot of value, and it was so beautiful. I think it was like St. Paul or something. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. And so he went to a town and he was supposed to wait for Jesus. So he was supposed to wait for someone to come to him, basically. I know a lot of people freak out when you use like Christian terms and shit. So he was supposed to wait for his mentor to come. And he went there and on a Thursday, for example, and he waited for his mentor, and his mentor didn't show up. And he was like, Friday, his mentor didn't show up. Saturday, his mentor didn't show up. And he was like, what the fuck? So he was like, I'm stuck here. I might as well do shit. And so he started to like talk to people, connect with people. He started to like go around and like, learn things from like the community there. He started to like be able to preach to the people a little bit. You won't believe it. Time went by day by day by day while he was still waiting, right? I think 2.5 months had gone by or something like that. At the end of 2.5 months, this guy was like such a powerful speaker and like a preacher in the community. And this came out of nowhere. He didn't even think to himself, I'm so powerful, I lead so many people. It was just so natural because he allowed the flow of one thing to the next. And so finally when his mentor showed up, he was like, what the fuck, dude? Like, I was waiting for you for 2 months. He was like, were you really waiting or were you just living? Because it looks like you were living and you've suddenly stepped into this place of so much power and tranquility. And that's how he was ready to go with his mentor to the next step and the next step. And my mentor gave me that example, and she said, you have to sit and wait. And in this time of waiting, you have to trust. Do things to develop your own skills. Do things that you really enjoy. Just like, play music. Go play soccer so much more. Connect with things. It was amongst the best times in my life, and I didn't have a job. But every day, I created a structure and a routine for myself, which included lots of studying on reparenting, inner child, conditioning, all of that stuff, just for my own self, because I was like, I need to understand my own bullshit. And so I studied so much of that, connected with it. I would give free counseling to people just because I had the time and the space, which I normally didn't have. And I used to go to a park. There was this beautiful park down the street from where I went, and I used to play football just on my own, because in the pandemic, there wasn't enough people. And as I was playing every day, people would come and be like, hey, can we join you? Can we join you? Next thing I know, we had a proper team that was playing every Sunday morning, and it excited me like crazy. Not just that, I would go to the park and I would journal. And there was this beautiful Spanish girl who, one day when I was journaling, she just came up to me and she's like, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I'm just journaling. And so she's like, do you mind if I sit next to you? And I said, sure, we can watch the sunset. And we sat down and we'd meet to like journal once or twice. And naturally, like, I was very attracted to her and she was very attractive. She was so feminine and beautiful. And as we started talking every day, we met, we connected, and we got into a relationship. I was not on a dating app. I didn't go running out looking for a relationship. I didn't go running out looking for people to play soccer with. I didn't go running out looking for people to teach and to preach to. And everything started working out. And then you won't believe it, out of nowhere, I was in this space and someone reached out to me and said, hey, I'm really looking for someone who can lead, guide, and support with me. Can you do it? And I was like, where the fuck did this come from? And I stepped into it. And out of nowhere, I had this opportunity which I had not, I didn't apply for anything. I didn't reach out to anyone. It all came to me. And it took 4 months of faith, 4 months of just sitting and trusting and believing. But I prioritized those things. I had a schedule. I used the masculine. I didn't ignore my masculine and just say, I'm going to wake up at any time and just fuck around and not do anything. I prioritized cooking my meals. I prioritized studying. I prioritized playing the guitar. I prioritized going to the park. I prioritized serendipity. I made sure that I gave my time and myself space for those things. And that is why I am here today, sitting in front of you with such a large community of people who want to listen to me, being able to do this work, because I waited with faith from I don't know where, 3 years ago. And I'm so privileged and blessed. I always go back to that point and say that's amongst the best times I've ever had in my life. And I was doing nothing in terms of what North America considered productive. But I was listening to myself every day. I silenced the noise, the bullshit. I was so at peace. I didn't feel any of the trauma surfacing, nothing. It was so magical. And the problem is, no one really tells us the value of us just as human beings. There's a statement somewhere that says you are valuable and powerful just because you exist. But if your whole life, nobody or nothing validates that statement, you'll forget it. It means nothing. It means nothing if you don't see proof of it all the time. So when we were young, people around us were meant to validate for us, show us that we're valuable just because we exist. A baby is not meant to serve a purpose to be something for the parent. It's the inverse way. A baby's just supposed to exist. And so our wounded, parents and societies wanted us to be a certain way so that they could feel better about themselves, but that shaped us into being something that made us not feel good about ourselves. So you have to take it back to you. And the biggest lesson of this whole conversation was, how can you bring rest, value, patience, creativity, flow, trust? How can you bring those back? All of those are feminine. The more I think about this topic, the more I'm at awe at how some of the most powerful things that we don't give ourselves access to in life are feminine. It sucks. You can be a very masculine man, for a man who's afraid of giving yourself this because you think you're going to lactate or some shit. Sorry, that was a joke. But you're not going to be someone super feminine just because you give yourself these things. In fact, you'll be a really balanced man. Some of the most powerful men I've seen, the most valuable and most masculine men I've seen, are men who prioritize their masculinity. So they will take care of their bodies, for sure. They will make sure that because testosterone is a gift for the masculine that you have to be able to use. So you have to take care of your body, your fitness, yourself. You have to, whatever that means. You don't have to be a fucking Arnold Schwarzenegger. You don't have to have a six-pack. You have to maintain and take care of it. But there are also men who prioritize having an emotional health. So it's not just a physical health, which is the masculine. It's also emotional health. They prioritize being able to listen to their like emotions. They prioritize being able to feel. And they are men who are so soft with their children. It is beautiful to see. It's when you see them with their kids, you see love. You don't see someone who's afraid of being vulnerable to their son, afraid of showing a tear to their child. You don't see someone who's afraid that if they are emotional, they're weak, because they know how strong they are. They don't need anybody else's judgment or approval or anything to say like, oh, you're weaker or any of that shit, because they know their strength. And those men are so powerful because they give themselves access to both. And I will be honest, those families with men who are really masculine almost always end up being extremely healthy, powerful, well-developed, because you know the concept of the masculine and feminine is also that the masculine is meant to be like the leader and the guide and the visionary. It's the feminine, however, that provides the trust and the faith to know that it will all work out. But the masculine is supposed to step into this place of being the leader and guide and visionary. And so if the head of this, like, you know, the leader is wounded, if the leader is doubtful, if the leader doesn't have strength, if the leader doesn't have confidence, then the rest of the family doesn't have faith, and the rest of the family doesn't trust. So if the leader doesn't have confidence in his own self and his own emotions, and this is something I've come to realize for myself more recently also, is that a healthy masculine will not take criticism personally. A healthy masculine will not take a feminine or a woman's emotions personally, because a healthy masculine will understand that a woman's emotions are powerful and beautiful, but they're hers to express. It has nothing to do with him. Yes, it may be a reaction to something that he's done or he's offered, which can be a corrective space for him to exist in. But a man who's insecure about his own emotions and his own like masculinity, he will shame a woman. He will say, you're too much, you push too much, you're too emotional, you're too needy. Now, it does not mean that woman is not in a wounded feminine space where she's over expressive, and all of those may be true. But a healthy masculine will not shame someone to let them know about it. A healthy masculine will say, hey, I just want to let you know that I don't have the space to be able to hold for like what you're going through or where it's coming from right now, and so I have to step out of it. And while that may sound scary, that's honorable. That's actually a healthy masculine being honorable and saying that I can't be the individual to hold space in this space for you. Or even a healthy masculine would say, I love you, but I think there's certain areas of where something is triggering you, and I'm not seeing how that may be benefiting us or holding us together. So let's look at this. Let's just evaluate this. Let's just like sit and talk about this together. But the other side of like a wounded masculine will be like, oh my God, you're always so needy. You're always doing this. You're always whatever else. You know, and look at that. It's unfortunate we have comments of like men don't give a fuck, because that's a wounded feminine. And I don't blame you, because you've probably gone through a lot of pain. I can tell you also on the other side, you have so many men who are like, women just want my fucking money. And it sucks. It sucks. On both sides, there are so many parts of community that are hurt and offended. You know, and this is on my page, right? And I don't even care. I'm not even offended that someone will say shit and say like, stop lying and stuff, because that's their experience and it's hurtful and I feel bad for it. But the truth is that if we evolve on our own, if we evolve our own healing, if you, for example, as the feminine, if you know that your feminine has not had space to be nurtured, valued, loved, and protected, if you can step into that masculine a little bit to support it, to allow it to like, you know, to rise, to allow it to grow, you will attract a man who will do the same for you. Why? Because now you've created a standard for yourself. Another real beautiful way of, you know, the masculine, or of you as women stepping into a masculine space to protect your own like femininity, is boundaries. Boundaries are structure, right? It's a hard structure. It's a wall. It's you know, something that's protective. People think it's to keep other people out, and this is what I teach people, is that boundaries are actually to keep your love in. It's not to like keep people outside. It's to keep your love valued, so you don't lose the value of what's within the boundary. The fort was built in the kingdom, yes, to keep enemies out, but what is it really doing? It's protecting the people inside. If no one's inside, why the fuck would you even need to have a fort, right? So the king is protecting his community from whatever has to come or anything else. So remember, your boundary is to protect you. It's not to offend somebody else. So when you find, and that's another way I wrote to my community, and I was telling them, I'm learning to step into my masculine, where I know like I have such strong feminine energy which can like listen to people's pain, which can hold space for it, which can help them rise and heal. Healing is a very feminine like energy and concept, which is why most healers tend to be like feminine, and spirituality is also very feminine. And so my masculine has to step in to say, I can't fatigue this energy. Because if I'm using and abusing this energy too much, if people keep coming to me and I don't know how to like draw boundaries, I don't know how to like, set them aside, if I don't know how to like protect myself, I'm going to burn out. I'm not going to be able to like offer any value to them. I'm not going to be able to like extend my connection with people. I'm not going to be able to lead. So I know that I've had to draw better boundaries myself, which I wasn't always good at. Things like time, I would allow like a call with someone or my community or the Gauntlet to stretch to so many fucking hours and I'd be burnt. The next day I have to like do it again and I'm like, I have less energy to give. On a live also sometimes, to be honest, like I would go on for like 2 hours, but now I structure and I say, no, yes, I know you love to fucking talk. I know you love to like give value. You love to hear people's stories. But now I'm like an hour and that's it. An hour and 20 or something tops. Because that's how boundary allows you to protect your feminine energy. So for you as women, you don't realize, but you might have to be masculine with other women in your life. Like, for example, if you have mothers or sisters or like, aunts or uncles, any of the other women, for example, if they are coming to you and they're like, they're criticizing you, judging you, shaming you, being like, you don't know how to do it. Unfortunately, like, the whole concept of like mother-in-law, daughter-in-law thing, like whichever way it goes, you don't know how to raise the kid, I raised this way, all of that stuff, then you have to be able to draw your boundary there. You have to step into that space and say like, listen, and boundaries can be drawn with kindness. Boundaries are not aggressive. Remember, that is projecting. If you're trying to shame someone through a boundary, that's judging them and projecting. That is not what we do in inner work. A boundary is about you. This is why I say to all my students, always bring the motherfucking focus back to you, and you'll be able to best deliver your emotional discussion or your communication to someone else. So in a boundary, when you come back and you say, I appreciate you providing me this advice or this consult or stepping in, but I don't think I can hold space for this. I don't think I can really stay for this right now. I need to step out and doing something else. You don't have to say, I need to protect myself from your cruel energy, because that's, again, unconsciously projecting. So instead, you just say, I need to really value my space. I really need to value my time, etc. And step away. But you are using your masculine to protect your feminine. Now, if you do that enough, what happens is suddenly your feminine's like, holy shit, girl, you're fucking beautiful. You're amazing. And so at that point, your feminine's going to say, you know what? I want to show more of you. I want to give more of you. I want to allow you to grow more. I want you to trust more. I want you to be able to express yourself more. I want you to bring yourself out more. You know what then happens? You start trusting your femininity more. Intuition, you start trusting the world, you start trusting, you know what? You start trusting other men. Because you now step into this place where you're trusting yourself more, you start trusting and will attract trustworthy men. I had this one-on-one discussion with someone, literally, I'm not going to repeat the same conversation. I love you guys, but I'm sorry, because I had this like 2 days ago, where someone said like, Yats, how do I know if I can trust men? Because men are all like, the same concept. We heard this just before, right? Like all men are untrustworthy and blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, that's your experience. But your experience is always going to be seen from the eyes of a lack of trust. Now, you have to ask yourself first, what's more important? Do I want to find trustworthy men? You have to really ask yourself that. Because the ego doesn't necessarily want to find trustworthy men, because if you find a trustworthy man, it'll change your belief about yourself. Suddenly you'll start to see, wow, I'm valuable. Wow, someone's showing up for me. Wow, this relationship's beautiful. And believe it or not, our conditioning doesn't want us to always have that. It sucks and it's hurtful. But that's why inner child wounds are so strong. That's why we like validating pain. It sucks, but we like validating pain and putting ourselves in that victim space. By the way, victimhood is a wounded feminine energy. It's a space where, unfortunately, if you're a man, or that's why I say a man who's not a healthy masculine will take things personally and will victimize himself and say like, I work so hard, like I'm so thing, and like I have like all of this like challenge coming my way, and you just keep shitting on myself. And on the contrary, a woman also who feels really victimized is in her wounded feminine energy, where she's like, just as we talked about, all men are assholes, or all like life is so hard, and like I never find good things. But staying in that space is not going to allow you to have something positive, right? Think about this. If you're so used to eating bad fruit, bad bananas, so used to eating bad fruit, if I were to give you a good fruit, a good banana, you'd be like, ugh, what the fuck is this? Because you're just not used to it. You don't know the value of good because you're so used to what's not good in that space, which is why it's important for us to step out of that victimhood space. And that feminine energy that's in that is a wounded feminine. And I'll tell you, all of you women, it's so funny that you'll even say there are no good men out there, because I'm like, man, I know a fucking billion great men. Great men. And in the same token, when I talk to a lot of men who are like, dude, all women are just after money, I'm like, are you guys fucked? Like, women out there are so gorgeous, and they're so supportive, and they're so like nurturing, and they're beautiful. You just don't know how to find them because you're looking at them from your wounded eyes. So it's the same on both sides. And I get you guys. I get you, because your wounds have brought you that. Mine did the same. I used to date so many like very masculine women in a row because I wasn't healthy enough in my own masculine energy. And so I wouldn't draw boundaries enough. I wasn't structured enough, disciplined enough, or committed enough. And so what did I attract? Someone who had to like balance out that energy. And it was a woman who did that too much. And so she didn't have any concept of like her own flow and energy and creativity. And then once you get into the deep aspects of the relationship where all like the butterflies and shit start to fly away, then you butt heads. Then you're like, shit, this is not really working out. This is not what I want. And I recognize it was nothing about them. They're just a reflection to the pattern I'm attracting. So instead, I had to work on me. And I said, what is it about me that's attracting these masculine women? What is it about me that's not attracting feminine women? And I realized maybe I'm not stepping into my masculine energy enough. You know, and Hector, you asked that question about, you know, what about men who express themselves feminine, like very feminine? I'll be honest, that was me. I was a very masculine guy when it came to sports and exercise and all of that. But when it came to like other elements of my life, I was more feminine. And so I expressed myself from like the space where I didn't want to take responsibility. I didn't want to take accountability. So, you know, it's so funny because I even attracted, the pattern was so obvious, I attracted women who were like very good at their jobs and made a shit ton of money. And I did so because I didn't want the responsibility of having to provide, which is a very masculine like identity. And so I was just like, oh yeah, let me just attract like this life where everything is just like ready for me and available. But with it comes its own bullshit, right? With it comes the fact that I didn't value myself enough. I would receive a lot of criticism. I had a poorer sense of like self-worth. So what I had to do was I had to separate myself from the relationships, and I had to first value myself and how I can commit to myself. Discipline. Remember I said discipline and commitment are the best ways, whether you're a woman or a man. They're the best ways you can use masculine energy to support yourself and to grow. And, you know, even as a woman, if you prioritize discipline and commitment around your feminine energies, you'll allow them to grow. As a man, if you use discipline and commitment around your masculine energies, how you can be more accountable, how you can have more structure, how you can be more disciplined. And I'm talking to you like the guys who are listening out there, like the discipline of that comes from like times you wake up, times you prioritize fitness, times you prioritize like, you know, showing up for family or somebody else in need. Those are all very masculine things also. And as I've done that more, I've started to really love showing up for the feminine. And it's so easy. Like I was telling you about my Mexican mama, I go down on her and I check on if she needs anything, like I help her with all the heavy lifting, like carrying stuff, take her out, all of those things, because it's so subconscious now. Like even if it comes to money, I pay for shit that she needs. I'm like, don't worry about it. Money will come later. Because my healthy masculine allows the faith and the trust and the feminine that life will reward me. And trust me, it has. And when I get into relationships with women now my energy difference and my balance has like changed so much to the fact that I know I'm primarily attracted only to like the feminine energy. And so I've attracted women who represent such strong feminine energy. And what I love about them is they've been demanding. They're demanding of a quality of life they want. And I'm like, I want to provide this. So financially, it gets me to work a little more. In terms of time, it pushes me to be this man who actually can be protective, who can take accountability, to be responsible. But I'm not that Peter Pan guy. And this, I want to share with you a lot of the men who identified like weaker masculine or feminine energy. Many of us are or used to be like Peter Pan men, and we don't even realize it. And that's where we want to run away from responsibility, go where the wind blows. We don't want to take accountability. Doesn't mean that life as the masculine has to be boring. It means that you just have to step into that structure to be able to make sure that fun comes in and around you. And I'm going to be really honest. I've noticed physical changes in myself when I've stepped in more into that masculinity. Like even the way my jawline appears, I'm like, oh my God, I look like I'm a guy who's going to have like a kid in like a few years. Like everything, not like dad body types, but I look so much more mature. I look so much more grounded. My body, my physique, everything is it's just going with the energy that I'm giving it. And my mind needs to have more of that feminine energy as well. And that's where like I need to now allow myself to rest, to trust, to relax. And I've attracted people and partners. It's so beautiful. I've attracted people and partners who I look at them relaxing and resting, and I love it. I'm in awe. Whereas the old me would be like, get up and go do something, value yourself, hit the gym, prioritize this. But when I allow them to rest and to be who they are, they naturally just pick up and flow and go do their thing without me pushing. And I realize this relationship now becomes so synchronous. It's not about like me having to like push them, but there are spaces where the feminine will challenge the masculine to rise above, and the masculine will challenge the feminine to be able to be more supportive and nurturing. And I think it's so important for both of them to, yes, challenge each other, but not to reject each other. There's a big difference between the two. And unfortunately, what we're used to in our conditioning, especially our wounded conditioning, is the rejection of the other, because we don't even know our own energy ourselves. So what I'm going to do is, like, I've spoken for so long and I'm very used to it, so don't worry. But I'm going to do like a quick little Q&A if somebody has a question. So Hector, I don't know if you still have that question, my friend. I know you already had that question and I answered it, but I hope I answered it well enough. Just to answer a little more, so, you know, men who identify as being more feminine, and this is good also for women listening, because there was this article written, okay, and I want to be really candid about this. I grew up in a collectivist society where, you know, like, for example, in Mexico, and I love Mexico so much because it's very similar to India. I think Mexico has a very healthy energy of masculine and feminine. You look at the women as well and how they dress up to value their bodies, whatever their body looks like. They dress up to appreciate themselves. They dress up to show off their like beautiful hair and their bodies and their culture, everything else. The men, and don't get me wrong, everybody has their own bullshit going on, but the men here are more, in my opinion, healthy of masculine. And it looks like to North American men that they might be feminine kind of guys, because you'll see their arms around each other, you'll see them hugging each other a lot. But these guys are safe in it. They don't give a fuck what anybody thinks. So when you go to a birthday, if you go to like, I was dating this girl once in America, and we went to like a park, and there was all these like Mexican families, and she said to me, she's like, I look at Mexican men and I'm like, I always want my husband to be that way. Because my dad never took me around like running and playing and enjoying all my time. But all of these men come back tired from work or whatever they are. First thing they love to do is play with their kids. They love to pick them around, take them around, like just show them. And for me, that's such a strong identity of a strong masculine. You're allowing your emotions to be fed by this beautiful little being that's full of fucking emotion, which is the child. And so you're allowing yourself to have it. You're not denying yourself of it. You're not working all night fucking long and saying, I need to make extra money. Like, that's bullshit. Like I apologize, but I never came from a culture of having 3 jobs, of like doing something, working all night. No. My friend, who was this girl who had like she had a wounded masculine energy, she was telling me her partner in the US used to work all holidays because he used to make 2.5 times the money. I'm like, so what if you made a fucking $1 billion, dude? Like, how stupid is it that on Christmas you with nobody in your family because you're working? In New Year's, you're just working all the time because people pay you more? You're a slave to conditioning. You're not a slave to your own choices now. You're not even like part of your own conditioning and beauty and everything you want to have. And so coming back to like the masculine side, a man has to be disciplined about where he's being wounded. And he has to be very disciplined and very structured about where he's stepping into the wounded side. For example, if a man's noticing that he's shaming or judging, you know, a woman, or he's shaming and judging anybody, even a child, he has to be disciplined enough to pull himself back. He has to be strong enough to take accountability. Accountability and discipline are actually very strong masculine concepts. He has to take accountability for how his wounds are showing up on his family. Alcoholism is a very strong way where that doesn't happen, where a man who's going through his own trauma completely absolves himself of accountability. So when he drinks, he takes it out on his family or people around him. And that's the very basis or example of how a human being or a man is not taking accountability for his own wounds. So when a man takes accountability for his own wounds, he's not affected by the wounds of another. So if his wife or his child or his family comes up to him with their wounds, he's able to hold fort. He's able to ground himself. He's able to support themselves and not take it personally. A wounded man would shame, judge, and project, and would also feel victimized and take things very personally. So if, you know, you want to step into as a man, and I'm going to come back to like the feminine and the women in just a sec, but if you want to step into more as a man, being more masculine, it doesn't just mean like, oh, go stand in front of the fucking mirror, like grow beard big, have like one of those fucking man buns or whatever else. It doesn't mean that. It means prioritize discipline, structure, and focus in your life. But bring those back to you. Allow and see where accountability of where you need to show up for yourself is important, where you need to show up to take care of yourself, your body, your surroundings. I think always, it doesn't matter whether you are the breadwinner of a family or not. I think a man's responsibility is always to keep his eyes open to take care of people around him. Whether it's your neighbors, whether it's your cousins, whether it's whatever. You don't have to pay and take care of everybody. That's not what I'm talking about. But when people are in need, you need to be able to have the strength to show up fearlessly. And that's why a woman, this is so amazing, right? A strong feminine trusts a strong masculine, not looking at him beat up other people. But she unconsciously, this is so powerful, a strong feminine unconsciously observes a masculine to see how does he show up for people in his life. Does he give a good example of how he can be protective, a good example of how he can show up, a good example of how he can be supportive, a good example of how he can take accountability? And if that's true, she then opens up what we call in India, what they call the yoni, which is basically like her flower. And like, you know, if you had to put it in physiological terms of vagina, but it's a yoni is basically feminine energy. She opens up her feminine energy to trust him, and without which she doesn't feel safe. So safety is the number one thing the feminine energy needs. So if you want to step more into your masculinity as a man, you have to be able to provide that safety. How can you provide that safety if you're fucking judging, shaming, or criticizing her? And if you dare abuse her, physically, verbally, or emotionally, my opinion, I don't want to say you, but it is the weakest man who does it. The weakest man is one who has to suppress anything that's weaker than him. Anything. And I think that's just a concept, unfortunately, that wounded parts of society give us. So, and Hector, that's a good question where you said an interesting concept, because if a man is too much of a giver, it seems to look feminine. So ask yourself, why is the man giving? Is the man giving so that he is validated? Is the man giving so he looks good? Is the man giving so that he's approved of? Because all of those are what victimized concepts. Your value is not enough unless you think you're giving and people approve of you. A strong man will give and not want appreciation. I had this other conversation with this Hector, and I know, but you have to draw boundaries. That's where, like, just saying an emotional giver, that's where you have to step into the masculine. Don't let that feminine side of you just like ride across, because then you're not going to live in your masculine energy. But this other friend of mine who's like very beautiful and very feminine, she was talking about how she was in a relationship with someone who like really adored her and loved her and everything else, and he would basically say like a whole list of compliments to her and say like, you're so beautiful, I love you, blah blah blah, I love your hair, I love this, I love that. And she would say thank you. And what's interesting is he would wait for a return of the compliment. But when it didn't come in, so Dreka Sheen, I know you just brought this up, so when it wouldn't come in, he would feel upset. And so he'd come back to her and he said, you could say those things back to me too, right? How does that come across to anybody? Does that look fucking attractive? If someone is asking to be validated? If someone's asking to be approved of just because they've done it? So then basically their compliment to you may not even be true. They may just be giving it to you so they can get something back in return. And especially as a man, if you're doing that, the masculine does not need to be validated or appreciated. It needs to be strong and confident in its own value. So when we had a conversation, me and her had a conversation, I was telling her, I was like, wow, your energy is so beautiful, and like, I love your hair and your creativity. She's an amazing artist. And I was like, wow, your art makes me fall in love with your energy because it's so feminine. It's amazing, and it draws me in. And I went on about it for 20 minutes. And she's like, oh, thank you, blah, blah, blah. And then she's like, you're really awesome too, right? And I was like, yeah, that's cool. Don't worry. And she's like, wait, what? And I said, dude, I didn't compliment you to compliment me back. And she's like, but isn't that part of the process? I was like, no, that's not. And I said to her, I know what I am. I deliver my value every day. I wake up and I look at the mirror and I have to convince and tell myself and show myself the value I have. I mean, you're amazing, but you don't need to tell me what I am. I know. So even if you told me I was shitty, I wouldn't care. If you told me I was amazing, it would affect me, it would help me, it would make me feel nice, but I wouldn't depend on it. So that's why for the masculine, you need to give yourself that like internal security to know what you are. And I know, Hector, I just want to bring up, I mean, I'm in this space where it's my job to like to give people emotionally, right? So I have an even bigger excuse to say, but I love giving and it's so nice. At what cost? it dries you out, it wears you out, so you're not using the masculine to protect your feminine energy, so you're wearing it out, you're giving it away constantly, you're losing it, you don't have enough for yourself, and you're not even drawing a boundary to show security. The most attractive thing I've done like with women is when they've come up to me and they said like, hey, let's do blah 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 blah, and I've been able to say, I'm going to be honest with you, I have this thing to work on right now, but I'm available at this time and I would love to take you out here, but I can't just come out at this particular point in time, or I can't just listen to your problems right now, or I can't just work on this with you right now. I will give you the time, but I have to finish working on and doing what I have to do. See? And he said you often get wounded after that. So when I've drawn that masculine energy to protect that feminine energy I was giving out, they love it. And they're like, wow, this guy is like able to draw this boundary, but with security, with honesty, with integrity, and not out of like fear, not out of saying like, fuck you, you're asking too much of me, etc. So does anybody else have a question? And I will answer if you have a question. After which, all right, question. Shoot your questions in here. Is it okay if I feel just like that as a woman? I'm not sure what just like that was, but I'm going to look at that. Lena, awesome question. Is it possible to be both equally feminine and masculine and still attract a strong masculine? So here's the answer. Every one of us has masculine and feminine energy. So you have to know that you have both of them. I just talked about how I had to step into my masculine to be able to to support my feminine energy. So we have both. Now, in my opinion of what I've seen so far, depending on what the sex you want to identify as, or the gender you want to identify with, you will predominantly have a stronger energy that identifies with that gender or that sex. If you don't have it, it is most likely because of your conditioning or the environment you live in or any of those other things that have suppressed it to say, I need to have the equal of this. And what's funny is it's also that many women who ask that, it's more women I think who ask that question than men, but I think women are afraid of being feminine. And what's so sad is that if you also watch, right, and I study this so intricately through people, through work, it's sad because the wounded feminine tends to insult the wounded feminine more, which means that's why a woman not secure of herself will tend to judge, shame, and criticize other women. And it sucks, it's tough. Where women will be like, if they not have something and they see someone who does have a good relationship, a life, a good body, any of those things that they think, they'll be like, oh my God, look at that bitch, she must be blah, 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 or he must be rich, or he must be something. And so by doing that continuously, they tell themselves also that I don't need to have this. I don't need to give myself permission to have it because it's scary. It's scary to have it, and I don't think I can. So that's my honest opinion, is that a lot of women, especially in North America, are afraid of being feminine because, and I just gave this fucking spiel for 2.5 hours on my call. So I'll try and see if I can put that recording out on my Instagram because it was a private call. But they're afraid of being feminine because society has judged and conditioned and shamed femininity for so long. So they're afraid of being really feminine. So that's why they tell themselves, well, it's safer to be more masculine. And society just fucking validates that. It tells them, yes, you should be tough. Yes, you should make more money. Yes, you should have this status in society. And that dependency on validation kills that femininity and the trust and the flow and the belief in oneself. So in my honest opinion, I think a woman, if she would like to believe in her femininity, should take that responsibility to build it up more. And again, commitment and discipline. I'm not sure if you saw the first part of the conversation, Lena, because I saw you jump down later, but you have to use those two things to give and allow more of your femininity to thrive, because it's integral to who you should be and who you are. And when you do that, you will not only attract a new, more masculine man, you can even inspire the men around you to become more masculine, to step more into their masculine, because they'll see the challenge. And testosterone loves a challenge. So muscles, for example, which are based on testosterone, only grow when there's resistance. So crazy, right? This is how the universe has based masculinity and femininity even into our fucking DNA. And people who don't know about it, or people who don't accept it, it sucks. It's critical, but it's into our existence. And so the muscle, which is fed by so much testosterone, grows only when it has resistance. So if it has a challenge, it allows the masculine to step up so much more, and allows it to feel you know what, if this woman is being so feminine, I need to step into demanding, and I need to step into doing this. And I've realized that some of the most powerful feminine women will demand. They will demand of their men, they will demand of their relationships, they will demand of their families, and a strong masculine will show up. He will draw boundaries. He will draw boundaries when the demand is, I don't want to say necessarily unfair, but when the demand isn't aligned, he will draw boundaries. And he will realign the community, the family, the relationship, but he will show up when it's needed. Next question. All right, let's see. By the way, if you guys want to, I'm going to put up something right now. Community.com. So this is my community where I had like an entire month of conversations of masculine and feminine, and I've only been able to do it on the live like here, like once or twice. But if you join that community, you'll also get access to all the recordings that we have for like the entire last month when I had those conversations, answered questions, challenges, all of that. And you can join for like $1 right now, I think. So just click on that, and you'll be able to like find out more about the community and how to join. But each month we have different topics as well. So it's a really beautiful community. I would encourage you to join. I get really personal with people here. Like I can't get too personal. Hey, and welcome to the Inner Yats YouTube page. If you like our content, make sure you click the like and the subscribe button so that you get more of these amazing videos that keep coming your way.